Hey everyone, I'm Stephanie, and I believe that all readers should read children's literature, especially adults. So that's what we do on the KidLit Love podcast. We celebrate all things children's literature, picture books, early readers, middle grade, and young adult novels too. Whether you're an adult reading to your inner child or connecting the young readers in your lives with fantastic books, you've come to the right place. Each week, we'll talk to a different children's literature author and discuss their books, their hopes and dreams for readers, their writing process, and much, much more. So, grab a notebook to build your TBR, and let's get to today's episode of KidLit Love. Hey everyone, welcome back to another episode of the KidLit Love podcast. I'm Stephanie Affinito, your KidLit Loving host, inviting you back to another bookish conversation with a children's literature author. Today, I'm talking with Tracy Badua. Tracy is an award-winning Filipino-American author of books about young people with sunny hearts in a sometimes stormy world. She's written multiple young adult and middle grade novels, including This Is Not a Personal Statement, We're Never Getting Home, The Takeout, and The Cookie Crumbles. She's here today to talk about her newest middle grade novel, Thea and the Mischief Makers. This book has a cast of characters to love, including two Filipino goblins threatening to wreak havoc on their lives and towns. It has such beautiful themes inside, and I cannot wait to explore them with her. So let's just get right to the episode. Tracy, welcome to KidLit Love. I am so glad you're here today.
Thank you so much for having me. I'm excited to chat about this book.
I am too. So I always like to start the episodes by having the authors tell us a little bit about themselves. And what I know so far from peeking at your website is that you're an attorney by day and a writer by night. And so I would love for you to fill in all the blanks in between and tell us how you got to the children's literature world.
Yeah, of course. So this is obviously audio, and I think what your listeners don't see is that I've got a massive amount of coffee just like surrounding me at all times. So I have, like you said, so by day, I do work full time. I'm an attorney, and I do basically just more writing, but it's writing for adults. And then after that kind of finishes up for the day, hang out with the kids, make sure everyone's fed and bathed and things aren't on fire. And then I have been trying to write at night, and that used to work. Lately, it has not worked. So I'm trying to figure out some new routines, but I usually try to squeeze in some writing at night or on the weekends. But this is, being an author is something that I've always wanted to do. And I'm so lucky that I get to do it and I get to put books out. But it definitely does take a lot of juggling and planning and prioritizing every single day.
Yeah, I can't imagine being able to publish the number of books that you have with a full-time job and a full-time life and children and just getting that writing in at night. That's kudos to you. That is commendable that you have done it with that kind of schedule.
So part of the reason I'm realizing slowly that this writing at night thing doesn't work is I sent a draft to my agent. She sent it back with very kind notes. And so I'm revising it. I'm like, oh, there are whole plot holes in this baby. Like, oh my goodness. So like I kind of want to email her and be like, I'm so sorry. I wrote this at 10 p.m. on very little sleep. Like, I'm so
Right.
sorry.
Yeah. Yeah. It's, you realize, okay, maybe that sleep is important. Maybe you're a morning writer and you don't even know it. Maybe that's the shift.
It really the importance of having a good support system and team of other people will let you know if maybe you need to gently, rework something or revisit a process.
Yeah. So tell me how the first book came to be. I know we're talking about a different book today, but I'd love to know, you're an attorney, you're writing for adults. What was that spark or that moment where you went, you know what, I want to do this?
So I did, again, I was always that kid that wanted to be an author, and would like write a bunch of books when I was really, really young. You know, you take all the paper out of your printer and you like staple it together and you break out your crayon. So I was that kid. But I have very intense. I have a very intense former school teacher grandmother who was like, you know, it'd be great, like being an attorney, being something with some healthcare. So
Yeah.
fast forward a couple decades, and I am an attorney. But I did, you know, I did want to get back to it. I wanted to uh, get back to writing. I will say writing creatively because there are plenty of attorneys who do write creatively in their own way, even though we should not be making things up. But I wanted to write something that would use kind of a little other side of my brain where it's less analytical, more just whimsy and more fun. And Kidlit is where it is because at heart I'm like a deeply unserious person. I don't think I could write adult. I think I would just insert too many like giggly moments and people would be like, "What is this?" But it was a couple of years ago. I finally settled on wanting to write middle grade. You know, I feel like a lot of us kind of waver of like, I want to write picture books or I want to write young adults or I want to write this. Middle grade seemed to be where I wanted to settle. And I had an idea to write something about like the Vegas thing. It was like a World War II something gets returned to somebody else. And that was coming off of me watching the Congressional Gold Medal Award ceremony for Filipino World War II veterans. So it
Oh,
was really like that spark and then just thinking about it for a really long time and eventually just having to sit down and write it. And that eventually became Freddy versus the Family Curse. That was my debut.
that was your debut. Oh, I love that. I love knowing the spark where someone finally gave themselves permission and then the time. And for you, I know now that comes at night for to do that thing. Oh, I love how you describe your writing as well. You write books about young people with sunny hearts in a sometimes stormy world. What a beautiful way to capture this time. I love it.
Yeah, and it's very purposeful because I know there is, you know, so much need for books where it is about, you know, kids facing adversity and how they tackle different obstacles in their life. But I also wanted to make sure we have plenty of adventures where it's literally just kids having fun, like
Yeah.
dealing with goblins, which I hopefully are fictional and that kids aren't actually having to deal with goblins in their backyard. But just I feel like just to have a good range where kids can have a little bit of an escapist adventure because it is kind of it does get tough out there.
Yeah, and we'll talk about it in your book, but I will say before I even let you talk about what the book's about yet, your book is a beautiful blend of both. There is a very much grounded in reality storyline about friendship and being in the in group and the cool group and how that works, things that kids will relate to on a very real, tangible level. And then the fun, and then that fantasy, and then that piece that just allows us to escape a little bit. So I think your book is a perfect blend of both, especially for middle grade readers, but this adult really enjoyed having both of those too.
Thank you.
Welcome. So why don't you tell listeners about the book, Thea and the Mischief Makers? And I would love for you to tell them in your own words, and of course, without spoilers, a little
What?
bit of what the book is about so they can wrap their head around it for our conversation.
Kind of hit on a couple of the big points. And when I say a couple of the big points, it's literally those two uh, goblins, those two duendes that are on the cover. So that's not a spoiler. If you pick up the book, they're literally on the cover.
I know, and they're
But
just, I love them on the cover, right above those characters. I love them.
I wanted to make sure like people knew exactly what they were getting into. So we've
Yes.
got those duendes right on the cover, terrorizing the two characters on the front. There is Thea, who is she's kind of like a Brazilian jiu-jitsu star athlete. She's finally cool. People really look up to her. She's having a great time in middle school. And she's also got a less than cool but very confident and awkward best friend named Evan who shows up again in her life while she's at this summer camp, and the two just kind of get into some fun together while she's trying to battle off those two goblins.
I've got to tell you, when I first read about them, I instantly went to Google. I knew that I saw them on the front page, on the cover, but I had fun just Googling and seeing the different representations and imagining Dora and Dante and what this is going on in the backyard.
Some scary iterations out there. I was pretty happy with the balance they struck,
Yeah.
where they're not they obviously look like supernatural creatures, but they're not like, oh my gosh, I'm going to be thinking about this at 3 a.m. kind of
Right.
scary.
Right. No, which I appreciated because when I went to Google, I realized, oh, we could go in a couple of different directions here. So I settled on one that looked like the ones on your cover that I could just, imagine playfully and wonderfully in my mind, and let the rest of what was on there go. But just such a fun element. And I love, like I said, there's a balance of this real reality of kids in middle school dealing with things that kids do deal with. And then this other element that just allows you to get lost in that adventure and that fantasy, but also some pretty, I would say, pretty big lessons come from these two little characters as well. So tell me about the inspiration for this book and what brought you to layer all of this together.
Oh, so this is this has somehow become my approach to m- brainstorming new middle grade ideas, is really just thinking about, okay, so what are some common like obstacles that kids face every day? And then because middle grade authors are terrible people, we're like, okay, how do we make it worse? What else can we add to just really drive home how hard it is to be a kid? And in my case, I was like, okay, then let's throw in some magic on there too. Let's throw in some goblins. Like, let's do it. Um, but with Thea, I definitely was, trying to think of the scenario where somebody's good at something. They're good. They're happy where they are, but they're challenged to do something a little bit different. They're challenged in a way where they're going to try something that they're not good at, and how hard that is. Because even outside of, being 8 to 12 years old, like I feel like we all do that all the time.
Yeah.
Of, if you're an adult and you're changing jobs, you went from being an expert in something to suddenly being like, okay, where's the bathroom?
Yeah.
And what's your policy on how long I can leave something in the refrigerator? There's all these things where like suddenly you are back to being not good at something, and how scary that can be. So that's kind of where I was trying to go with Thea, of her diving back into a scenario where she's not good at something, plus the added pressure of, oh no, all of her friends know her as being the girl who is good at stuff. So how she navigates that. And then of course, because I'm terrible, I threw in some goblins just to kind of break stuff in her room.
Terrible or very fun.
A little bit of B.
So one of the things that jumped out at me in that scenario with Thea was this connection that she has with Evan. And so Evan was kind of I don't want to say an old friend, but a friend in her previous school, kind of in her previous life, or in her words, I wasn't really cool. But now in this new space with new friends, she's kind of living up to these expectations that she feels that she's living up to now. And then Evan's kind of there. And she's struggling with that at first of, oh no, how will my new friends accept the old friend and what do I think about this? And I thought that was such a typical struggle for this time because friend groups change. And sometimes
Yeah.
they're good changes and sometimes they're not, but either way they're just really difficult. And again, I don't give spoilers, but I just loved the interactions and the interplay between him. And I just really love Evan. He is such a
I have heard
lovable,
that. I
yeah,
my husband read this book and he was like, Evan is literally the coolest character in this
he
book.
is.
And I was like, I'm glad. And that was also kind of purposeful. If he's gonna be like the awkward kid that doesn't fit in, I want him to be like, in his way, a cool kid.
Yes. Yes. I felt like it was such a great distinction between Thea, who's good at something but is doubting a lot of herself. And
Mm.
then you have Evan, who's very publicly clumsy and owns it, and it's like, oh, I'll get better. no big deal by the time it's over. And I kept thinking, I want to be like Evan.
We could all have the confidence of this like 11-year-old boy.
Yes. Yeah. I know. No, it was, yeah, on this podcast, I always say that adults should be reading children's literature. And I feel like it's books like these that remind us of our own inner children and the way we worked then, sometimes still the way we work now and the way we wish we did. I just thought those two characters gave us such things to think about in terms of how we show up and what we do. Yeah.
It's funny because I remember talking to my editor once, and we were talking about one of my young adult novels, and she was like, have you thought about writing writing for adults? I was like, look, I am barely getting through my middle school and high school trauma. Like, you're gonna have to come back to me in like 20 years. So it's funny that, like, it kind of works its way into our books of like all those things that kind of haven't left us
Yep.
in years and years and years. And maybe it's not something personal, or it's something that we saw somebody close to us go through. We're like, oh wow, I wonder how hard it must have been for them to do this, or to dive into something they weren't sure about, to try something new. So
Yeah.
try to weave that in and like address it in our little book therapy that a
That's
lot of
it.
authors do.
That is it. It is book therapy for sure. It really is. So we've got this, relationship and these changes in friend groups, and that is all going on. And she's confronted with doing something that just doesn't feel easy. And then the goblins show up, right? So could you give us a
Right,
little
right.
context for how that happens in the book for listeners? It won't be a spoiler, of course, because we know
Right.
about it,
They're
but
literally on the front cover, so no
yeah.
surprises.
Tell us
Um,
about, how they entered the story there.
so from a very, very basic level, I knew I wanted to add some magic into this. And my go-to is thinking about all the times that my grandmothers would like kind of casually threaten us with the supernatural of like, don't go over there. There's a goblin, or don't go over there, there's like a monster over there. Just like,
Yeah.
oh, okay, so let me dig up that one little piece of trauma. Oh, right, goblins. Okay, let's see if we can work that into this one. And specifically duendes, where they are, at least in kind of Filipino culture, it's more like they're more mischief, more pranks. Like, don't cross them because they can get really mad, but they're more, they kind of do their own thing, and they're a little bit of mischievous. So they're who I wanted to put into this book. And of course, you will start to see, and not a spoiler, but you will start to see that these duendes kind of have different approaches to how they want to handle Thea messing with them. Essentially, she breaks a branch of the tree that they live in, and you have one duende that is definitely like, okay, so I'm gonna fill my regular like duende role and play some pranks on you, but then the other one maybe takes it a little too far.
Yeah.
So that's kind of like the little me taking a little bit of liberty with the folklore and trying to flesh it out and make some fun characters. But that's really where it came from, was digging back into what would be a good, like, is there a Filipino folklore, or is there just any sort of folklore that I can fit into this that would be fun for messing with a fictional 11-year-old.
Yeah. Yeah. And it was fun, right? Because they do mess with her in various ways. And as you noted, it does get a little bit more and more and serious as she's thinking, oh no, like how do I stop this? How do I get out of this mess that I was in? And there's one part of the book, I have it flagged. And I have it flagged and sticky noted and underlined because for me as a reader, I thought, oh my goodness, this beautiful lesson that she just packaged up in this magical goblin. And so I want to point it out because listeners, I know even if you haven't read the book, you've lived life. And I think this piece of the book will really drive home. And it's when it's when she's thinking about, what am I going to do? And this idea of apologizing. And as you mentioned, one is easier to work with and talk about than the other. And is it okay if I read a couple of
Please
sentences, the
do,
piece
please,
that I have
please.
underlined? Okay. It said, all this time, I thought my apology had to come from my heart, that I had to be sincere, but that's only part of it. The apology has to speak to the other person's heart too. I stopped. I closed the book at that point. I got a little teary and I thought, "Oh my gosh, what a lesson." Because that is it. We can be sorry, but it's the thinking of the other person and how it's conveyed. It was just such a life coaching therapeutic moment. You mentioned books as therapy, and that was it for me right there.
Oh, I'm glad, and that definitely took that was definitely a book therapy moment where, like in the course of me deciding how I want Thea to apologize for ruining these Duendes home, I had to really sit there and think about like what does an apology look like? If someone apologizes to you, what makes you say like, yeah, it's okay, or what makes you think like, okay, they're being disingenuous, they just want to move on, they don't really care about changing things. So in the book, she has to go through this kind of trial and error process of finding out what it really means to be sorry and to have the other person kind of have the choice to forgive you or not.
Yeah.
So it was tough. That was one of those moments where we're like, oh no, like this this really is like therapy in a book of like me trying to figure out like, okay, so that makes sense. Of all the times where we've said sorry to someone and they're like, well, that should fix everything. You're like, no, it will not
Right.
fix everything. The
Right.
other person has to feel it, has to get it too.
Yeah. And as a reader, in the beginning of the book, when all of a sudden she realizes, oh my gosh, this is true. Life is going to come in on me. I have to fix this, but she has no idea how to fix it. And they do not tell her how to fix it. As a reader, I was sitting there wondering, how is Tracy going to fix this? How are they going to fix this? And, thinking in their mind, what's that one thing that will work? And so when I came upon that section, I thought, oh, there it is. That's that piece that fixes it. And then the other was, you know, knowing that sometimes people act in certain ways because of what has happened to them previously, and realizing in the other apology she had to make, it wasn't about making right what she did, it was about helping heal something from his past. And I thought, oh my
Mm.
gosh, she has done it. I don't know how she did it, but he gave me all the feels with both of those to see how it would end. And I loved it. I felt like it was a wonderful ending to this magical part, but it was such a gift for middle grade readers to get that idea. Like right now at this phase of their life, instead of, 40 something year old me who's like, oh, that's no apology. Beautiful.
And that was another one of those moments as I was writing it, I was like, oh my gosh, this took me like far too long to figure this out. But the idea that no one is going to tell you how to apologize. You have to figure out what is appropriate for that moment.
Yep.
So I thought that was like really tough on Thea and like good because then I was able to build a couple chapters out of it. But it's her job. He's not going to tell her, this is
Yeah.
how you fix it and this is how you're going to make me feel better. Like she wronged him. She wronged the Duendes, both of them. She has to figure out how to make it up to both of them.
Yeah. So good.
Tough.
So good. It was so good. And I do have to say, on a funnier, lighter note, since I have read your book, I keep saying one particular phrase over and over again to myself, to people around me, to my kids who are like, what are you saying? And that is tough nuggets. And readers,
Tough.
you're just going to have to read it to figure it out. But I've been having a lot of fun just repeating that to myself.
I'm so glad that I work like a catchphrase is coming out of this, but tough nuggets.
Yeah.
Tough.
Yeah, that's it right there. I think it just embodies whatever you need it to embody, and it feels really, really good.
Thank you.
Welcome. Oh, so clearly I loved it. I think kids, whether they are coming to the book for the friendship, whether they're coming to the book for the jujitsu and the really cool obstacle course, or
Mm.
they're coming for the goblins and the really fun things that come out of it. There's something for every reader here on whatever level they are hoping to seek it or find it. And I'm honored to be able to be as part of the launch buzz for this. It was such a wonderful book.
you. And I'm so, again, so glad that I get the opportunity to talk about this, because it is fun to relive all of the twists and turns that I've woven into the book.
Yeah. Oh, so you're writing more though, right? You've written before this book and you're still writing after. Do you get to give us a sneak peek of what might come next?
Yeah. So I in 2025, I have two middle grade books coming out.
Wow.
I know.
Ew,
I am
you're
so
writing
tired.
machine.
All this coffee, like, again, listener, imagine me just surrounded by 3,000 cups of coffee right now. But I have a middle grade mystery that I co-wrote with author Alicia Dow. It is the follow-up to our middle grade attempted murder mystery, because they don't let us kill anyone in middle grade. It is a middle grade mystery called They're Just Desserts. It's the follow-up to The Cookie Crumbles. So this one is set at a baking competition show, which I love.
You
It's like my
too.
favorite thing in the world.
Yes, I was just watching the Holiday Baking Championship last night on Food TV.
It's
Yes, I'm here
it's
for
so
that one.
soothing. There's something about it of like, this is other people's stress, and I get to watch something
Yes.
delicious being made. So we have a mystery happening at a kids baking show. So that is Their Just Desserts, that comes out in May. And then in fall, I have a book with a ghost in it. It is called Ghoul Summer. It's a kid in a haunted bed and breakfast and a haunted vacation rental. So
Wow. Oh, I love it. So it sounds like, again, with this book, you've got some layers of reality kids could go in, some layers of mystery, some layers of magic, so just so much there for readers to decide where they want to get cozy. Oh, I love it. Congratulations. My gosh.
thank you. I am very tired. And again, this is why, like, at some point, I need to figure out how to actually sit down and functionally write a book again, because putting out a book is also a little bit of work of
Right.
of making, graphics and social media and doing, school visits and all this fun stuff, but it is not sitting down and writing, which I need
Right.
to do.
And that makes sense of how you said in the beginning, like you find yourself needing to reflect on that and perhaps
Hmm.
take stock. And that makes sense because you've got these books coming out, which comes with a whole nother host of activities that are
Mhm.
not writing. So I can
Yes.
see now where, that structure may not fit so well because of a whole lot of reasons, but one, because there's so many other things on top of the writing that you're doing now too.
Yep. But it is, I am so lucky to be able to put some books out into the world. So any griping I do is really just like add a layer of gratefulness and thankfulness
That's
on that, but
right.
also a little bit of griping and then some more coffee.
Yeah. Well, you've got a fellow coffee lover here, so I'm here for all of
Perfect.
that. Where can listeners find you online if they want to keep up with you and your books, whether it's your website, your social media, if you do author visits? Tell us the things.
Yeah. So because social media is always in flux, I will first start with my website. So it is tracybadua.com, TracyBadua.com. I'm also pretty active on Instagram, because there's something nice about pretty pictures and short captions.
Yep.
And I that is at Tracy Badua Writes on Instagram, and I'm trying to find my way on Blue Sky and Threads on same thing of Tracy Badua Writes or Tracy B Writes.
There's so many things to juggle when it comes to
So
social
many.
media, isn't there? And where do you go and where do you stay and how does this one work versus the other? Yes, I'm glad you started with your website because that always brings comfort to
I was
me.
like, that one I can control. I can control that my website exists.
Yeah,
So if for some reason all of these implode or change in the next few months, at least you can go to my website and I will be there.
that's right. But you'll be writing. You won't be there. You'll be writing.
Right. I have contact forms. So if you want to like interrupt me, I welcome interruptions, clearly, because I'm on all these social media platforms. So send me a contact. And my information about my books and my author visits are also there. So
Great.
website is a good go-to.
Okay. Well, I will be sure to put links to that. I will include your Instagram there as well in the show notes. And of course, links to the books that we mentioned. And I can't wait to see the new ones come out and to be able to celebrate those with you too.
Yeah, I'm excited. I will. I will bring more coffee for that. We can
Yes.
share another cup.
I would love that. Always an open invitation to come back and talk about any books that come in the future. I would love it. This has been a lot of fun.
Great. Thank you again for having me.
Oh, thank you. And listeners, thank you for listening to another episode of KidLit Love, and I'll see you inside the next one. Thanks for listening to today's episode of the KidLit Love podcast. You'll find links to all the books, resources, and ideas mentioned in the show notes at alitlife.com. And if you want more, you might like to listen to my other podcast called Get Literate. It's a podcast that explores all things books and reading, notebooks and writing, and everything in between to build a life you love. One more thing. If you love what you listened to today, please take a moment to rate and review the podcast or take a screenshot of the episode and text it to a bookish friend. This helps the podcast grow and builds our bookish community of KidLit Love. Thanks for listening.